The veils are thinning, and you don't necessarily see this in the, I'm going to call in the human realm. I'm going to say this like in the, I don't like the word colonized because that's not quite accurate. That term has been hijacked. So people that live in urban areas, suburban areas, these areas are, the human field is very, very thick. And when the human fields are very, very thick, that means the collective fields are very thick. So it doesn't even matter what you believe, it's what the collective engages with and believes. And so when you are around very thick fields like that, then the thinning of the veils is not as obvious. Where it's most obvious is when you are engaging with nature, when you are engaging with the forest, when you're engaging with areas that there aren't a lot of people, and if any people, and then the collective fields are thinner, and then the feedback loop that shows you the veils, how they have thinned, come to you more immediately. When you're in the thick human fields, there's a very significant delay to the feedback loop, and it's not as obvious. Now, you and I, we're sensitive people in this, in the ideas that we're very tuned into ourselves, what's happening inside, and our authenticity. We can tell we feel different, but how we are different here affects the outside world isn't as obvious. It is present, but it's not as obvious. So when we're in nature, it starts to be this bold print on the reality that it's like writing on the wall you can't not see. And it's exciting. It's very exciting. So I want to tie this in with Sasquatch, because this is something that they actually told me it was a good idea to put out there to folks. Yes, definitely, darling. All right, I was just pausing to respond to her comment. I would love to reconnect. Okay, so let's go into some indications that Sasquatch are reaching out to you, and and even responding to you. So you don't always have to be the initiator of the communication with Sasquatch beings. Let's just say it like that, because for me, they came barreling into my reality with a great big bang. You know what I mean? So, and I wasn't looking for it. I knew they existed, but it was out there somewhere. I didn't really care. I didn't understand what kind of beings they were. I just knew intuitively that when people talked about these creatures, that yeah, they do exist, but it wasn't, the interest and curiosity wasn't anything more than that. And then what came to pass is that they like crash landed into my awareness and my world, and I couldn't not see them. I couldn't not acknowledge them, and that opened up the rabbit hole of my journey with Sasquatch. So you don't have to be the one to initiate it if it's something important, if it's something significant for your purpose and your path and your healing, authentic expression, all these things. But they don't always come in with like a giant cinder block. They do that only when they have to. Okay. Most of the time, they do things that are, most of the time, that is after the, like say the ice has been broken between you and them, as in, they exist, they know, like, the awareness has connected. After that, the interaction is gets very, very subtle. And some people, are fine with the subtleness, and some people aren't. They feel like maybe they're doing something wrong, or maybe, they think that, they're not as satisfied or satiated with the subtle realm interactions. But let me tell you why that happens, why the subtlety is important to Sasquatch. And this is because humans, when the veils are open inside of us and we're interacting with nature, how closely we pay attention or don't pay attention really, really matters. So whether you believe in Sasquatch or not, or elemental beings or not, if you're a human that pays real close attention to nature, you are tuning in to these spaces, these aspects beyond the realms. You don't know that because the frame up isn't there. But there are people who have had that kind of lifestyle, who have been opened up to these elemental beings and other interdimensional beings, and so on and so forth. So yeah, they can do things like mind speak, which is undeniable communication. This is where they are speaking in your head and you can't not hear them, right? They do things like appear, get really close and appear, or not get really close. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Come really close to this reality so you can see them with your eyes. They do that. They also will manifest things right before your eyes. So maybe we consider that performing miracles. They can do that. They can do these things that are miraculous and undeniable, but that's not the preferred way of interacting with you. They prefer to interact with subtlety, and the reason why is they are conditioning you. They are training you to learn to pay closer attention. Okay, now, I mentioned how I trained as a body worker all those years, and I did have a practice for quite some time. I retired out of that just in time for COVID, which is amazing. I was completely transitioned out of in-person sessions by the time COVID hit, which was very grace and action right there. Anyway, the training, bodywork training, what that did is teach me to look very closely, to listen very closely. For example, the cranial sacral. You have to be very still, quiet, aware, and listening in order to tune in to the sacral, sacral, I'm saying it backwards, cranial sacral pulses. There are many pulses within the pulses. And when you go years practicing that kind of observation and study, you don't unlearn that. You don't, just like a musician that cultivates a very fine-tuned ear, they don't unlearn that hearing, right? Now they might get hard of hearing, which is a whole different thing. You don't unlearn that ability. So for me, I was trained for years and years to pay very close attention. And then on top of that, I was being trained by different, I'm going to say, immortal beings and shamanic masters in my dream time. So they were also teaching me to pay close attention. So I went many decades being taught the about observation and the kinds of things you can, subtle things you can actually observe. Now, this can take many forms, and this is an asset for a human to have when you're interacting with interdimensional beings, like the beings that we call Sasquatch. So this is why they do things that are subtle. They'll leave glyphs, for example. Glyphs, simply, if you don't know what you're looking at and if you're not paying attention, you'll never notice them. They're usually different kinds of shapes and geometries or letters being formed out of sticks or leaves or something like this, and they will leave them for you in key places and the key places are usually an answer to a question, or they are responding to you, letting you know that even though you're in a different place than you usually are, they're there, they know you're there. Like, you come out and there'll be a glyph on the patio, even though you're not in the woods anymore, but they left you a glyph in the patio. It's like, it takes really close observation to notice these glyphs. And that is on purpose. This is to help train you about watching, paying attention to the details. The real big thing that's difficult for humans is learning how to listen. And I don't mean just to the words. I'm talking about listening with your whole being, listening with your whole body, which is what tracking is all about. It's just not using your psychic abilities. Your psychic intuitive perceptions are a tiny piece of what tracking is, which is listening with your whole being.